We'll wait about a minute or two and then we'll get started.
Hi, Kylie.
All right, everyone, we're ready to begin. Is everyone ready?
Ready?
Hello, my name is Sam Forche. I will be your moderator for this panel. Thank you everyone for joining tonight. And today we do have 2 ASL interpreters, and also we have closed caption available. So if you do want to use closed caption, please hit that tab. So I'll explain briefly what this panel will look like. It'll be 30 to 45 minutes with questions with our panelists, ask them questions about their experience at the Conservation Corps. And in the last 10 to 15 minutes, we will open it up to the audience for questions. So I'll ask all of you guys, just please turn your cameras off and feel free to enter in the chat box your questions, comments, concerns. And also our support team will be feeding me any type of questions you have towards the end. Does that sound good? So I do want to introduce everyone. I want you guys to introduce yourselves, where you're from, what Conservation Corps program you were in, and also what year. Keith, do you want to start? And where do you work now? Gina? B? Chris? Hello, My name is Chris Daly. So I'm involved for almost 3 years. I would say 3 summers, 1986 in Colorado, the beautiful Colorado mountains. I was in awe. In the Estates National Park in 1988 in Washington State, and also the Snoqualmie Parks. It was for a short time in 1988, and the Olympics National Park. So I really enjoyed myself, and that was some good memories. But right now, I work for the Deaf Hood Foundation. So I had every chance I could get to go camping at that moment. Because, at my age, before I used to tent all the time and go camping, but, a step up as age gets to me, I'm just a camper. At least you're not on your own. All right, last but not least, John. Hello, my name is John Wilcox. I'm from Boston. So I'm a teacher at a deaf school there. So before 1990, I worked for the SCA, the Student Conservation Association for Deaf Youth. And also it was at the Olympic National Park in 1990. Sam, thank you all for introducing yourselves. So I'll go ahead with the questions now. So out of curiosity, what was your relationship and what was your view about the Conservation Corps in the community? So I guess it was just a Minnesota thing. So
Sorry. Growing up in Minnesota, I guess it was a Minnesota thing because I guess it was, with the snow, oftentimes, cars, would drive off the road and we would have to help them, whether it be, shoveling them out because the snowstorm was coming in really bad. But I think it was just that concept wasn't really new to me. It was innate, to just always want to help and support people in that form. But it wasn't really until 2009 where B had kind of pulled me into conservation corps. Just, it was a group of our friends who just really like to go out, into nature from early 2000s, and onward we would do that. But it wasn't until 2009 when I was pulled in by B that I was explained to what conservation corps was, and realizing that it was a lot more physical, a lot more blood, sweat, and tears that would be invested into it, and also recognizing that there was a lot of benefits for me as well as the environment. So I think that was something that I really value within the experience, and that I wanted to continue.
okay, B.
I think community service is one aspect of it, is that wanting to work with people, no matter, who they were, they were beings living on the planet just like, other animals were. And so having that in mind, and also working with Conservation Corps as well, of course we can life on its own could nature on its own could survive if it wasn't for us humans having destroyed the environment. So thought it was right to provide that service, make sure that we are providing equitable opportunities and equitable access, and job access to folks as well. So seeing that community service aspect there was really when change happened, because whether it feels funding or a lack of funding was involved, we saw that there was mobility and people who are trying to fight against the funding for it as well.
Can I go ahead? Yeah, sure, go ahead. So I was only 17 years old when it was my first time joining SCA. And really, I had no idea what it meant to provide all of these things. I just wanted to go out and have fun in the beautiful parks. But my first experience was very eye-opening. That really was an emphasis on my experience. The National Park Ranger would always come and bring us supplies. And, he would have to ride on his horse because, it was about 12,000 feet up. And we were there for about 4 weeks. And every time he came, we would always thank him and he would thank us for what we were doing. So it was always an emphasis on the thank you. And he would say, if it wasn't for us and the trails, we couldn't keep up with this and it wouldn't be upkept as like how it should be. So I thought at that moment, he needed us to really improve these trails and we thought it was nothing. But now I understand that we're working on the trails and it helping us move forward and continue this work. And it brings thousands of visitors who use these trails a lot. So I began to understand what it meant to provide a service and make that impact. And I think it's good for that park ranger to tell us thank you over and over because we felt like we were doing something good for the earth, for people. So that always stuck with me. That was very important.
This is Gina. I think related to your experience and being thanked was an experience in itself. I think it was really cool to do the job. And looking back and working in the parks and seeing myself there, my job there, working in the trails and making sure the trails were flush or even and make that there was no barriers within that and in those spaces. That's, I guess back then community service for me felt like something more so I had to do because of high school requirements. And I think we were required to do 20 hours. So, I kind of brushed it over. But when I actually got up and did it, I saw the benefit and the work and the impact that it had. And so that's what I was proud of.
This is John. So I imagine what community service meant. People with different types of skills all brought together. And how do we spread those skills out through the community? We take those skills that we learn and we spread it throughout the community. So that was a cool thing to do, to spread these skills. And also it brought personal growth. Just like you said, after work was finished, we looked back and said, wow, I did this a long time ago. So that was nice. This is Sam. So you guys have any moments that you value or memories that you want to share? Any things that you look back, that you want to share? Anybody?
Many.
Chris? This is Chris. I think just the group of people I was with, after we were finished work, we would go hiking for a few miles. It was just a rich experience, even though it was tough, raining, snowing, storms, things like that. But, we would never forget these moments. And, it was just a rich experience that we would treasure.
This is B. One of my favorite memories, one of those consistent moments of just thinking like, wow, this is something that we're, still doing and never forget. I think back in 2007, I often felt that, I was one of the only deaf staff within the program. So it was pretty isolating and lonely. So now seeing as how much of a rich opportunity it was for me to learn new skills from a variety of people, including like Keith, like, recruiting him, bringing him in, just to see the potential it was for them to grow in their skills too was really cool. So just being able to have that effect and ripple effect, and being able to see how it's led to the founding of Core That, it was just really, just really good to see how that in itself was something that I never really thought that would happen. But now seeing that it's my experience of being the only deaf person does not have to be that experience anymore for anyone else. This is add to B's comment. Um, this is Keith. I think recently we had a discussion about um, just I guess I'll renew my memory. I did 4 summers straight of conservation corps, and sometimes I forget which program I was in at what time, because just a lot of stuff was going on every week, and working at the national parks in northern Minnesota was such a different community, but it was also such a short program that I would never forget. And so I still remembered the people who I worked with, though. Um, Even though I don't remember what time it was, I remember the crew that I was with. There were several deaf youth that I had supervised, and I know if it had an emotional impact. Um, because some of them, called me their dad, and that wasn't necessarily my intention to be that father figure for them to these kids, but I did have an influence on them that they probably didn't have at home with their actual parents. Because a lot of them would say, "Well, I talk about how much they learned and talk about their experiences." And you would see what they would go through within the weeks there, and that was really touching for me. Um, and so many of them would contact me, say hi, still call me dad, or pick up me, whatnot. But even though there's that, it was an experience that was touching it, and I'll remember it forever.
This is John. So a memory that I have, my program was 4 weeks, and the first 3 weeks we worked hard. Worked hard, blood and sweat through the trails, and also our reward that fourth week was backpacking in the Olympic National Park, and we hiked along the beaches, and it was just quiet. You can see whales. It was just crazy. We dug for clams, ate those, so that was a lot of fun.
Wow. So Gina, I think one memory, I had talked about really partnering and working with other people. When I was working at SCA in 2015, um, in a pretty broad area from New York City and down. Um, when I was working in Puget Sound area from New York City and down the East Coast, there's about 2 or 3 people per region. But when we all came together, a few times actually for different projects or whatnot, I remember the last time we had worked together, we had built a state park. And I know during the camping ground that we were on, there was nothing there. It was just trees, and we were camping on top of the hill. So we were able to see the sunrise when we were working, right? We were building bridges and until the end of the night. And so at the end of the night, we usually play card games together. And that's a memory that I oftentimes see that shows up in my Facebook memories. It actually showed up last week. Um, but it was a moment that I really valued it, and it was a good time.
This is Sam. So to add on that, you guys just shared your experience, but also the projects you worked on. What were they? And also, Gina, you mentioned about building a bridge. Can you just expand on that very quickly?
This is Gina, sure. So our role varied depending on what we're doing. Within SCA, we were in charge of controlling various species and also monitoring weekly activities and projects. So when it comes to the bridge, the concept was basically for folks to be able to walk through the forest if by chance there was any floods that came up. Um, so if there was a flood, the bridge would also rise up with the water so that they can stay dry. We also built beach benches just for folks to sit down and sightsee. We also constructed new trails, making sure that the trails maintain the standard look of being flat and whatnot, make sure that they're clear and visible and clear of any debris. So we're in charge of that in 2015. But in 2016, our experience was a little bit different. We did also build trails, but more so it's more about trail maintenance.
This is Sam. Anyone have another project they would like to share and add on, and just big or small, some small things that you love to anything?
This is Keith. I think one painful moment, not necessarily bad, I don't mind sharing. I was working with Aaron, who's interpreter, and working. I was also working along with the youth, and we were at one of the state parks, and I can't remember necessarily where it was in northern Minnesota, and we had to carry boards. And these boards are pretty long. They're about 8 feet long boards that we had to carry on our shoulders. They're pretty painful and thick. And so we had two people carrying them together down a mile long path. And so having that on your shoulder was pretty painful on on your shoulder, right? And as we're going down trail, we had to drop off the boards and walk back and do it all over again. And it was pretty exhausting, especially after do it during the rain and for 3 days straight. And with that, I remember we were talking with the maintenance staff, and they had said, you know what, we're sorry, we told you to put the boards in the wrong spot, but it was actually supposed to be somewhere else. And we thought, well, we did our job and we're not doing it. No, we're not changing it. But it was a great experience because all the staff got to get a workout out of it. Yeah, there was that.
This is Chris. My experience with trail work was fascinating. We worked with water erosion, so that was something new. We would have to split into teams. This group would focus on cutting down trees and bringing the logs to the trails, and the other team would carry these old logs on the trails up steps and hills, and we used to walk up the log steps. So we should take off the old log steps, remove them because they were worn out, dig them out, and actually insert the new logs and level it out with dirt. So this was a thing we always did, split up into teams. Sometimes like, I don't like this person, let's switch up. But most times it was the same team. And then the following year, we were involved in cleaning the campground, cleaning the fire pits, the bathrooms located on the campground. So we would always argue about that over cleaning the restrooms because we didn't want to do it. That was ill. Who's doing it this time? I'd rather do this or that. So, most time we did take turns and we worked it out. This is John. At the Olympic National Park, at the campground, we would redo trails. A lot of trails had roots, the dirt, so we had to actually combine the trails into one trail because the trails would split off into a few. And so we always moved up into the highest mountain, and up there we needed helicopters to bring all our stoves, equipment, our food. And so we would backpack up to the hill and dig out more trees. So that was a nice thing. This is Sam, a helicopter. Wow.
This is Keith. I have another story. Back in 2009, I was working with Nina, who was another director for a program, as well as interpreter. It was a really good experience. We were working on one of the islands, and it was in the Olympia Mountains. And so it wasn't that high, but we had tried to bring water to the top of the mountain. And it was pretty a steep climb. We were prepared to, be camping out for 3 weeks. So we had all of that uh, materials on our back. And so as we're going, we noticed that there was a path that kind of got, it was unwalkable. So we had to go another direction. So we had to get a Paluski, and that was my first summer. Um, Back in the day, that was used to cut down trees and whatnot. And so that was a really good experience in doing that and trying to find material to, I guess, flatten out the trails. And I think that experience in itself would have been impossible without, using some things like water barrels and other stuff that oftentimes we didn't have the resources for there, unlike we do today. And so just having that experience of using that Pulaski on the tree was pretty fun.
This is Sam. So working on the projects and working out on the trails at the campsite where you actually slept every day. So what was the daily, when you came out of your camp, what did it look like? Can you explain on that? John? This is John. So I work with high school youth and they were all deaf and they were from the city. So they didn't know what was going on. So I had to teach them how to pitch tents and also have different skills that they would learn, where you should go to the restroom, not nearby, you have to go a little further, or you have to, do a number 2 in the proper area in a hole. So we had to teach each other how to make sandwiches. So every night what we did, I had a stove and I made bread every night. So the kids would learn how to make bread every night for tomorrow morning. Everything was homemade that we did. So it was so nice.
It's Keith.
This is Sam.
So they're ready for today then. It's different.
This is John. So we would have to wait for the yeast to rise, wait for about 2 hours, and then bake it. This is Sam. B, I see you had your hand raised. Did you want to say something? Hey, B, can you see me?
I think we all, had experience of, taking down tents and whatnot. But I think one of my favorite memories was just the opportunity to connect with the youth, my colleagues, and just feeling, being able to just to decompress. Because, during the day, there's a lot going on. And I'm a pretty empathetic person. And so just what we're doing, I felt so bad at, like, I'm hurting the earth, but like I know there's benefits to this, right? And so, like, once we were done and got back to the campground, I would oftentimes have this one-on-one conversation with me and the earth and say, "Are we good?" or something like that, just to make a connection to that camping experience. And I think that for us as youth, it gave us a lot of experience and tools that we can use in our future, especially in terms of how we connect with the earth and how we use resources in food. So I think there's a lot that I gained from that. This is Keith. I think one thing that I think of today in working with TCM, and after our summer program was done, I would tend to usually walk for 1 to 2 miles during the program and think we'll be fine. But once we were back in our cities, it felt like, walking a mile or so just felt like it was too much. And even if it was meant to come to the store, you just see, like, people would rather use their car to go down the block when it just and to buy something, but they would not use the opportunity to go walk to the store and instead, just think about the different ways we can save gas or not. So I think that once we came back to the city, we just came back to the daily life of city life, and in using our vehicles when we were so used to using our feet instead as our mode of transportation. So I think that the skills and things that we learn about valuing the environment, we should bring back to the places that we come back to. And I think that oftentimes too, we measure the impact and difference of what it feels like to walk in these nature spaces versus what it feels like to walk in the city. This is Gina. I think my experience is a little bit different than yours. So within SCA, we were in cabins. So they provided cabins for all of us, and however, the cabins did not have air conditioning or heat, but there was some electricity. And we were actually, cabins were underneath the bridge. Fortunately, underneath the bridge, fortunately, there was no cars that were going over the bridge. And there was lighting available for us at all times. We did have the ability to drive because we were loaned a truck. But that was in 2015. And in 2017, that was interesting. The park got a few trailers. Were donated a few trailers. And they were fully furnished. It had bathrooms, kitchens, and everything, and as well as AC and heat as well. So when it was pretty easy just to go out of the trailer and walk into our work site, and we really didn't have any problems with that. So my experience was a little bit different there. And this was after Hurricane Katrina.
This is Chris. So I had two different experiences. The first summer I was in Colorado, so we had to hike with all of our things. And I remember I was hiking and it was about 6 miles in. So at that time, I didn't understand anything. I was 16 at the time, and I was just hiking and walking and walking. But at that time, making new friends, I'm like, when are we going to be there? And they're like, just keep walking, just keep walking. We're going to die. So once we got there to where we actually lived for about 3 to 4 weeks, I think. So we camped the whole time, and we set the bathroom up in a certain location a little further up. So a good memory about that was we always had like a few moments of alone time. So I had like a favorite rock. Maybe once I got finished work, I would, walk over to the rock, and you can see the lake from the rock. So it was just many type of moths, those animals. So I would, just gaze over. So this was just so beautiful, especially the stars at night, gazing at the stars. So that's something I really enjoyed. And also in Washington, we camped, and something happened right before we started the work for the day. I had like tooth surgery previously. So I didn't follow what the dentist said. I didn't follow the instructions. I have to take all the antibiotics until they're out. So I just went ahead and said, sure. So about a week or two, I got a bad infection. So I had to call my mom to come. I didn't drive at that time. So my mom had to drive a couple hours, yelling at me, saying I didn't follow dentist orders. So had to get more medication. So my mom asked me, did I want to go back? And I said, yes, I want to go back with the crew. So the pills, what happened, I took them, I got sick from that medication. So I was in my tent, the bathroom was a little ways up the hill, and also it was raining. And my tent started leaking. I'm laying in a puddle of water. I feel like I'm on an island. So I'm like, I have to go to the bathroom. So I just got out of my tent. I just had to bear it all. But it was just a little sufferable 2 days of my life, but I survived. So I just think about people back then. How did they survive moments like that? I wonder. This is saying, wow, your overall experience is amazing. But also, I want to ask you a question. How did you find these opportunities? This is John. Back then in the 80s, we didn't have any internet. So how the word got across was posters at the deaf institution. So I looked and I said, hey, why not? I should apply. So just imagine now we have technology, everything is easy. Before we had nothing. It was all mailed through letters. So that was a nice thing.
This is B, yeah. So back in 2007, I had just finished my first semester of college and first year of college. And I was thinking, well, I don't really want to go back to Pennsylvania. Um, and I saw the opportunity for Minnesota Conservation Corps, and I thought, well, no, excuse, I lied. This was my second year of college. Um, so in 2007, I decided to go ahead, and I realized that was the best decision that I could have made, and it really woke me up into what was out there in our country. And afterwards, after that, I fell in love with it, and it was just a matter of just reaching out to people and telling them to go for it. This is Keith. I'll never remember the moment. I'll never forget the moment of coming in. It was me and my roommate. We're working with CCM, and I thought about working with CCM, but it wasn't until B had really pulled me in and convinced me to apply. And at that time, I was kind of waiting to see if I was going to get into Gallaudet. I was really a academic person. I was more of a hands-on person, especially like I was saying now, like I work with Apple and I fix phones. So when I applied to CCM, everything was hands-on and it was perfect. And so I was able to thrive there. And I would say with the first two times it was great. Third time it was cool, but the fourth time I was necessarily prepared for it either. But they're all summertime programs. This is Gina. Again, very different from all of you. So there was a boy. I can see your faces now. So I was dating a guy in college, and he had graduated and went home, and I was in Rochester, New York at the time. So I was thinking like I wanted to be a little bit closer to him. So after I finished my semester, I was kind of reaching out different folks um, about different jobs within the Pennsylvania area that were within the conservation environmental field that was pretty close to him. And so some folks like saying that there wasn't really any, but I should go ahead and apply to SCA. And so I thought, well, I'm not a student anymore. So let me go ahead and look into it. So when I did, there was so many positions open. And so I interviewed for a position and I got it. But when I got it, that's when me and my boyfriend at the time had broken up. But it was it changed my life and it was the best decision I made. Um, but it was a weird situation, but it worked out at the end.
This is Chris. Honestly, I don't remember how, so long ago. I don't know if I saw an article somewhere or because we didn't have any internet at that time. So I went to a mainstream program. It was a small program. Maybe the teachers told us but the funny thing is I applied, I went in, I met the people in the crew, and also others in the crew were from Washington. So our high schools were close and we were always a competitive school with each other. So we built that bond. But the other kids were from all over the country. But thank God, I found it. Thank God. This is Sam. One last question before we turn it over to the audience. It seems like the chat is going good with questions. So, your overall experience, working and, applying yourselves in general, the conservation industry, do you think it's accessible for us as deaf people? How do you feel about that?
This is Keith. I think that I was lucky in the time where my first experience was I had a director named Alicia who signed pretty well, and was also very supportive. And my second, third, and fourth summer, I had Nina, who was just amazing. Um, she signed pretty well. She's also an interpreter. And of course, with that experience and knowledge as an interpreter and being knowledgeable of the field, uh, she was able to bring in 4 or 5 other interpreters in the space. And so that was made it more accessible for more youth to come as well and grow that group of deaf youths. So oftentimes they would go to schools for the deaf and give presentations to the school and come into classrooms and talk to the youth. And so I know that with my group, that we had I think maybe first time 3 or 4 folks, maybe even 6, 7 be saying, was pretty small. But I think afterwards, our group, grew up to as large as 15. So it was a pretty different experience. But I think that the administrators and directors played a big difference. I think unfortunately after 2012 when I left, the directors weren't as I guess aggressive or assertive in that work of recruiting folks. Um, and so there wasn't that much support and advocacy, so that's when isolation started to happen and interest kind of lost. And so but I think right now with the use of technology, there's a lot less people who are interested in being outdoors and working conservation, so there's a challenge there with that.
This is John. For the SCA, back then it was 2 programs, high school supervisor for the general high school kids there. And then we had the trail crew. So we had to train for 1 week. So we flew out to Minnesota for training. They had interpreters provided for the whole time for that 1 week we were there. So that was amazing. So when I worked at the national park, I met the national park president and we worked some things out. Interpreters provided as well. So that was a nice thing. So the deaf kids with us who signed, and I was kind of like the deaf role model. So after my years of doing it, they didn't have any deaf program. And the reason was SCA struggled to recruit some deaf. They had a hard time finding deaf youth to get involved. And so I said, you have to pay them to fly in and out. So it was a hard time to recruit the deaf youth. So I look back on that. It was really, really a pleasure, and it would be a pleasure to, have it up and running again. Like I feel like Corvette can help with the recruiting of the deaf youth, and have it up and running again. This is Chris. John, you said you worked at Olympics National Park. Did you work with Elizabeth Rothman? Oh yeah, she worked with my first group, and she was the key. She was very active, and she was an interpreter as well. So she did a lot to bring everyone together, and she was an ally. So she understood the importance, of a deaf crew. So she was the key, and also she made it a good experience for us and our whole group. So we had the deaf crew, and she was the leader for that one. The second crew was good. The third time, I was pulled in to be to be in the crew, but I got sick the third round. So yes, she definitely was a key person to help and understand the importance of signing and the deaf crew.
This is B. I think also with watching and seeing Cordat grow, I felt like that is what we needed to spread information to the masses. I think one problem that we still see though is that when it comes to conservation court, there's so many different avenues and opportunities that you can get into, and that um, when it comes to reaching, there's a lot of hearing folks that join the spaces. So for me, when I was working with CCM and it came to recruiting folks, I think that the issue was, well, will they pay for my transportation and flight there? Some youth were not able to join because they live in a different state. Um, it was just a lot of little things, logistical things that oftentimes related to funding, um, that they couldn't join their location because there was no deaf folks there. They would only be there, only deaf person. But let's say New York City had one, but it was a matter of having the funds to get them there. So I think having the ability to have an equitable experience was something that was needed too.
Let's keep it in relations with this topic from Sam.
This is Gina. I think with an SCA, from my knowledge, I was the only deaf person in New York, in the whole state. I'm pretty sure I was the only deaf person. They definitely provided interpreters without any problem for me. But in 2017 in Virginia, it was myself and another deaf guy, and that it was just us two in Virginia for my specific area. I think there was another group that did have a deaf woman. So I think in all of Virginia there were three. In terms of interpreters, it was successful, but I think I do want to go a little bit more in depth of what B was talking about when it comes to pay and transportation. So I think in general, the industry it lacks the funding. From an organizational perspective, when it comes to providing interpreters, it's not cheap, right? So just think about how many times I was denied jobs within the conservation space. I know they never said this, but I think it was because of lack of funding to be able to provide interpreters. So I think that's one thing that we could and should also advocate for, is for the funding, and also maybe potentially creating a special interest group of deaf folks within the space that also want to ensure the professional space can be challenging. This is Keith. When I first joined in 2009, 2010, one well-known there was a well-known interpreter within the deaf community in Minnesota, was involved in conservation corps for maybe 40 plus years. Well into starting in 80s. Started there, then became an interpreter. And oftentimes he would mention that back in the 80s, there were two groups. Close to the one was closer to headquarters where it's all hearing, and then there was another group that was all deaf. I don't know how many per se were in that group, but it was close to the harbor in the northern part of the city. So I think there was about in between the years of 80, 88, 80, 87 before the two groups had merged together. And so I wish that, there was an opportunity for us to have joined that space, where, it was just an all deaf space. But, when it comes to joining a hearing group, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It was just, when it came to that, it was usually 2 to 3 deaf youth and then 2 or 3 hearing youth. And so it was more of a challenge to have an all deaf deaf crew, which would have been a dream, right? If we could have a larger all deaf and hard of hearing crew, though.
This is Sam. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the audience for questions. And feel free to turn on your camera. You can say a little short story about yourself. Don't be shy, But if you rather, just have it off, it's fine, but it's up to you. And we also have interpreters as well. If you are speaking, we can have the interpreter's time for you. So I think I will go ahead and take a question from the chat. So the question says, I have hearing loss, and I do the love the outdoors, and I love to be involved and identify more with the deaf community ASL, but I don't now. So do you have any projects that can fit me?
This is Keith. Just join. You'll pick it up on the way. I know that certain things might not be perfect, but I would just recommend just joining. As we all talked about, when it comes to crews and projects, we all did different things. I remember mostly, no matter what it was, I remember the people who I worked with and how we communicated all day and all night. We played games and did certain things. So I think that was the most important thing and what I got from the experience. And also, I think that within the spaces we had, kind of made it a rule to have quiet dinners or quiet lunches where everyone, even if they're hearing, they're not allowed to speak or at all. So they had to figure out ways to communicate with us, deaf and hard of hearing folks, and also made an opportunity for them to learn how to sign. So it um, gave them an opportunity to do that. So I would say just go ahead and join and see how it is for you in that experience. And it's also never too late to do it.
This is Sam. We have another question. So I'm thinking, will Corvette, expand and 20 or 30 years later? What do you think?
Fingers crossed. It depends on funding, support, um, more partnerships, and logistics, as B had mentioned. Logistics is usually always a challenging part of it. For example, with Cordat, the first crew, summer crew, it went really well, but the van that they had was a rental, and it was also pretty small. Now with Minnesota Cordat, we had a partnership with Dunbar, which was where the state was able to provide us vans at any time we needed, whereas Cordat does not have a former partnership. So I think it's those little things that play a role.
This is Chris, and I think it's important that we don't forget and how we bonded with nature. Because back then, we didn't have technology, but we still needed that connection with nature. So today, I just look back more and more and understand the importance of the connection. So it made us really human and really appreciate who we are. So I just hope this continues. This is Sam. This is the last question. It's almost 9 o'clock. I'm so sorry. So we're almost done. So the last question is, this person wants to see and understand, is it still spiritually inside you every day, like those moments? Do you still feel that?
This is B speaking. I think with nature, you just continually learn to enjoy it. And within the past year, I started to run every day. And running had definitely made me realize that I crave the outdoors and I crave to connect with nature. And I kind of find a way to force myself to connect with the outdoors more through running. And so I feel like that was just something always in me. And I also would say I have a green thumb, as you can see in my background. But that was something that CCM had taught me, was to connect more with nature and also connect more with people. So that was an experience that I'll definitely never forget. This is Keith. Related to Kylie's question, speaking of spirit, I did comment, but I would definitely say that there's definitely a culture. Once you're out there and once you've done the work in that space, um, you know that you've done it. So similar to what Gina said, yes, I think that the grand mains and other stuff, it just kind of sticks to you. So it becomes, oh, correction to interpreter. I have a water bottle and I usually collect stickers and I usually put it on my water bottle to help me remember what's going on. But I think with Conservation Corps, you can definitely see and understand that. But having that water bottle there to help me remember is definitely cool. And it also provides that kind of influence too, to something to consider for your experiences. This is Gina. I think joining Conservation Corps was one of the best decisions I've ever made. I talk about kayaking as one of my, working in the parks was one of my special interests. It was mainly because of my conservation experience with building connections and realizing that's where I needed to be. And so now where I work at, in the park I work at, I do a lot with environmental education. And looking back at it, if it wasn't for SCA, I don't know where I would be today. I really wouldn't have any idea. So I would definitely say it's something that I'll carry on for life.
This is John. So I've worked in the outdoor fields for 35 years and I've met so many kids here and there. And most of them remember the time of spending out in the wilderness. So that was a big impact and something they will remember for a while. So the wilderness itself is our medicine. We have to give these kids the medicine, that inspiration, our energy, and it's very powerful. And any conservation corps, any outdoors program, we have to get the kids involved. Start them young and expose them. This is Sam. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up with a nice bow. So thank you everyone for coming out with our panel tonight to get your chance to ask questions and answers.
Thank
And
you for
also
this
we
hour.
want to thank CCM, our sponsors, for the interpreters as well. Thank you. And those of you who saw tonight's stories and you think you want to join the summer program for Corps That or any conservation corps, just take a look and do it. And we are recruiting for this summer. CCM is also recruiting, so go ahead and sign up. And also we have different employment opportunities and we have an event this Sunday for career paths. So we would, say a little more about the jobs we have in the position. And if we haven't answered your questions tonight, just please email us at info@cordet.org. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Nice to see everyone. Bye.